components, a financial review of each agency, staffing and personnel of each agency, and then we did a confidential web-based staff survey, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then we look at capital facilities and equipment. And then very importantly, historical service delivery performance of each agency. So we're looking at response times, response performance, incident density, all kinds of things for each one of the organizations. And then section 1B was support programs, which included training and continuing medical education, the Fire Authority's life safety program, and then public education and prevention programs. And this involves both agencies, and then any special operations. Any questions so far? Nothing? All right. So then section 2 was a community risk assessment, and this was a basic community risk assessment. We looked at service area demographics. What are the demography of Clear Creek County and the service area, and did an all hazards community risk assessment, looking at all your primary hazards. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. And then we concluded with final recommendations, consolidation recommendations, and then a discussion of Clear Creek Fire Authority and a discussion of Clear Creek EMS. And if you've read the study, rationale for not pursuing consolidation in the immediate future, and then alternatives and future considerations. And then appendices, which included all the comments from the online survey. So this was a map we generated. It's the study area, shows the boundaries. Majority of Clear Creek County is serviced by fire and Clear Creek EMS, the Fire Authority and Clear Creek EMS, with one corner of it serviced by Evergreen Fire Protection District. And in this map, we show each of the fire stations and the EMS stations. So we looked at the organizational structure of each agency, and I won't get into the details of this, but just to show the contrast between the difference between the two organizations. Clear Creek County EMS, as you know, is a county organization with a director, and there's 3 shift captains that oversee paramedics and EMTs on the organization. The Fire Authority is a little bit different, overseen by the fire chief, who is overseen by who is supervised by the board of directors, the Clear Creek Fire Authority board of directors. And then there are different positions in operations below, and he oversees the assistant chief. So one of the things we do we look at in detail, and I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of stuff on financials. It's very complicated. I'm not a finance guy. I have really smart people that work for me that get into the details of this. If you have more detailed questions on the financial stuff, let me know, and I'll be glad to follow those up with people smarter than me. But this was the revenue and expense forecast of Clear Creek EMS that we did up through 2026. And based on our analysis and our forecasts, financially, it looks pretty good for EMS based on their current revenue stream and expenditures. Clear Creek Fire Authority is not quite as rosy of a picture. And based again on our forecast, we're going to start losing money now, this year and last year, all the way up through 2026. We're going to have a decrease in the fund balance. And again, that's based on the data we had, we were provided. So some of the other things we look at when we're doing the study, again, this is the section that we do. We're looking at all the current conditions of both organizations. So this is just a simple inventory of the number of fire stations, staffing, etc., and compare the two agencies. The next table below that is the collective fleet staffing inventory by individual fire station, what apparatus are in there, what medic units are where, and the daily staffing. So as I mentioned, we did a staff survey, and this was an online survey, a Survey Monkey, and it was done as a confidential survey. And so we didn't know who responded. And let me go to the next slide. Oops. So question one, and we had a pretty good response, about 45 respondents total. Question was, I'm employed, volunteered, or affiliated with, and the majority of the responses came from fire, about 51%. That was followed by EMS at 44%. So that was a fairly good, we thought, response because both organizations are not huge. Question two was what their position was. The majority of respondents were firefighters or an officer on the fire authority. That was 38%, followed by 33% career EMS providers. Not surprising who answered that it would be firefighters and EMS providers. Number 5 was understanding that the details of a potential consolidation of Clear Creek EMS and Clear Creek Fire Authority have not yet been determined. What is your current opinion? So 33% of the respondents, or 15 people, said they were generally in favor of consolidation. 8 or 18%, they're opposed to it no matter what. Didn't matter. And then surprisingly, very surprisingly to us, was that 31% had no opinion and 18% had another position. Not sure why. And I think subsequent to this study in our interviews, direct interviews on site, that opinions changed. And because when we met with, and I'll mention it later, but I want to, in case I forget, when we met with individuals on site from both organizations, it was apparent that the majority, all except for one person we met with, were opposed to any form of consolidation. So it changed. That could have been due to people talking among themselves after, because we did the survey originally in the study, at the beginning of the study. And so things may have changed by the time we did the site visit. So service delivery and performance, that's when we look at all the data and do data analyses. We generate maps and those sorts of things that I will show you here in a second. So between 2018 and 2020, the Fire Authority, this showed the Fire Authority service demand. You can see that there's a substantial decline in numbers since 2018. Some of that we think is due to COVID. It kind of leveled off in 2019 and 2020. I don't know how the chief, if the chief can comment or not on your service demand, number of calls you've got in 2021. Chief, do you have any information on that? Has it increased? I hate to put you on the spot. You there? No, I'll just continue then.
I can answer that. Actually, it's 1354.
Okay, so it has increased.
Yeah, it drastically went back up once we got through the 2020 drop. It came back.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. So the top 4 NFIRS incidents, NFIRS are National Fire Incident Reporting incident types, were EMS calls, totally expected, followed by fire-related calls, good intent calls, and hazardous conditions. So based on the data we had for that 3-year period, those are the most common calls. Again, EMS is totally expected to be the highest number of calls. This is EMS service demand and transports. You can see in the darker blue color, those are the calls that were dispatched, and the lighter blue is the transports. So you can see that transports are about half of what the total call volume is. And there's another table here that shows during this 5-year period range from about 46% to 51%. So around half of the calls that in which an ambulance is dispatched for Clear Creek EMS, about half the time patients are transported. So you don't get the full amount of revenue, and it takes these rigs out of service probably unnecessarily, because if they don't transport, they're not needed, and it doesn't produce income. So here's one of the maps we generated. These are incident density maps. This is all the EMS calls. And you can see that again, and this is expected, that the highest concentration of calls for EMS are in these areas. And these are the areas of highest population density. Population drives calls, particularly EMS. So not unexpectedly around Fire Station 2, EMS Station 2A, Fire Station 4, and Station 1, Fire Station 1 are the highest demands, or the highest demands for EMS. Fire is about the same. These are fire calls only. And you can see around Fire Station 4 had the most fires. Had a few more out in this area out west, but again, around the higher populated areas. This is one of our, we do a temporal analysis, essentially looking at calls by hour of the day, by month, by weekday. Pretty consistent by month, pretty consistent by weekday. Really where it counts is looking at calls by hour, because that has to do how you do your staffing. And in the upper left here is EMS, and it follows a similar pattern to fire. And this is typically what you see in most systems, where call volumes start to go up when human activity increases during the day and starts to decline at night, and slows down in the middle of the night. And it is pretty common, this sort of pattern for calls by hour of the day. This is another map we did, and it shows travel distances by time. And we looked at 4-minute, and we have multiple maps in our study. And I'm just pulled out a few of them for your information. This shows 4-minute travel time and 8-minute travel time. These are GIS studies, GIS generated maps that generates how far can you get in a 4-minute travel time. And if you don't know what travel time is from the time the unit or apparatus or medic unit ambulance leaves the station or begins to respond, and then arrives at the incident scene. It's that interval of time. And so the maps, or the GIS software shows how far can you get in the district in 4 minutes, how far can you get in the district in 8 minutes from each of these stations. That's making sense, I hope. This is an important number. This is turnout time. Turnout time is from the time the unit is notified until it begins to respond. And that can be done, that can be like when the pagers go off. It could be when they're notified at a station, but it's from when a crew is notified, or a department or EMS agency or fire agency is notified that they have a call, until the crew gets on a rig and begins to respond. So the benchmark or national standard for EMS calls, and this is the national standard, is 1 minute or less at 90% of the time. For fire calls and other special incidents, the standard is 1 minute, 30 seconds, 90% of the time. In my 40-something years of experience, I've never seen any agency that can meet either one of those turnout times. If you can get close, that's great. But you can see here, overall, for fire, and this is fire only, their turnout time was 3 minutes, 19 seconds, 90% of the time in 2019, and went pretty far up in 2020 at 4 minutes and 44 seconds. Now, some of this doesn't look real good. These are not particularly good turnout times. But I want to emphasize, we're not here to criticize anybody or say somebody's doing a bad job, but there definitely can be some improvements in turnout time, because this, of course, affects overall response time. Now, looking at fire authorities' response time performance, the benchmark is 14 minutes at 90%. And in 2019, it was 1641. In 2020, it went up to 1801. So it's about close to a 2-minute difference in overall response time performance. Fires tended to have the shortest response times at 11 minutes and 48 seconds in 2019. And EMS, where response times can have a more important impact. I shouldn't say more important, that's a bad call. If it's a fire and somebody's trapped, or if it's a fire and you don't knock it down and within a certain amount of time, you can have a worse fire. So response times can be important, definitely important in fires and EMS, but not all EMS calls and not all fires. So I wasn't very articulate in stating that. So here's EMS performance 2019 to 2020. Their turnout times were 2 minutes at the 90th percentile. So it was a 2-minute even at the 90th percentile. But keep in mind, they're staffed with all career personnel, and so they can do a much faster turnout time. Response times were 18 minutes, 53 minutes at the 90th percentile. Time on scene, how long do they spend on time at the scene? 90% of the time was about almost 34 minutes. And then transport to hospital times, that's significant, 49 minutes at the 90th percentile. And that's significant because we know that your transports are going to end up going to Denver. And so you can plan on every single call. You better assume about it. Your whatever medic unit is transporting is going to be out of service at least an hour, hour and a half or more. That's significant. So just looking at a comparison, EMS had a turnout time of 2 minutes. Fire had a turnout time of 4 minutes and 44 seconds. Response times were fairly close to each other, which was interesting. How fire can have its 4-minute turnout time, still get to the scene pretty quickly is impressive. I don't know how they do it. So EMS, the primary impressions, the kind of patients they see is, what are the paramedic impressions? Unfortunately, 839 of the cases that we got, it was not recorded. But oops, I hit the wrong. So, but the number one impression was anxiety disorder unspecified. That's really interesting and not consistent with what we see in other systems. But it'd be interesting to see what is in this number, this not recorded number as well. And most of these typically don't look like critical, real serious incident types. Chest pain can be significant, respiratory distress, obviously. If it's a serious traumatic head injury, this kind of gives us a clue on how serious the patients are. And this is transport mode. You know, what mode did they use when transporting the patient to the hospital? Was it lights and siren, no lights and siren, emergent versus non-emergent? So in 2020, 6% of the patients that were transported required an emergent response, meaning they were going lights and siren to the hospital. Interesting and not consistent, again, with other systems, is 44% started out as an emergency transport, but were downgraded to a non-emergency transport. But of all of these, 50% were not recorded. So we don't know in those cases. Now, this is where we estimated population growth and service delivery projections. We use different sources. In this case, this is from Esri, company that produces GIS software. They keep all this data there. It's very good. And this is what we predicted for population growth through 2025 for the service area in Clear Creek County. Making sense? And this was, I'm sorry, the second one was using a different format, different values, different methods to forecast population growth. So community risk assessment was part of this. So it started out where we went with service area demographics. We look at population and density, housing characteristics, the occupancies in your community, in your service area, technological hazards. And then we do an all hazards community risk assessment, look at land use, spatial visualization of data information. There's maps in there, depending upon the various topics and areas that we looked at. I'll show you some in a minute. Environmental hazards, critical infrastructure, comparison of fire risk in other communities. And here's one of the maps we created. This is wildfire risk, which is one of your top community risks in this county, as I'm sure you know. And it shows the various areas where there's high threats for wildfire. The next map is flood zones, FEMA flood zones. And they have this thing called base flood elevations, and it's all in here. But it shows you there's all kinds of areas here with the potential for flooding. And then our report essentially ends with our primary recommendations. And as I kind of mentioned in the front, we recommend that consolidation of EMS and fire not be considered for the immediate future. But we believe that it needs to be considered in the future. And we believe that you guys should be taking immediate steps based on the other recommendations that I'll discuss, that you should be taking immediate steps to move forward to do some things we think are in the best interest of the community. So I'm going to just stop for a second. And does anybody have any questions? Did I miss anything? Does the chief and Brian want to add anything?
I think we need to get together as a group and discuss this afterwards here in the near future and work off of this, because during this study being conducted, we were in process of changes and additions, and so things are a little bit different than what you saw when you were able to interview us. And so I think, definitely we need to stay engaged in that discussion of looking at our future, which, we're constantly looking at from the fire side. And I know Brian is from the ambulance side as well. So we have we have improved since this process started.
Brian, is there anything you want to add that I missed or you think was important?
No, one of the things you did mention was our times that it takes for us to get to our incidents. And just to let everyone know, the reason why our times are higher is because we have to go to Loveland from Georgetown, which is something the fire department doesn't have. So that kind of puts a little perspective on those numbers of why they are as high as they are for Clear Creek EMS. That trip from Georgetown to Loveland on any given day is pretty substantial. So that's all I'd like to say.
Yeah, and please don't consider it criticism. Clear Creek County physically is a fairly large county. You're not going to get ever 5-minute response time. It's just not going to happen. Maybe in 100 years or so, but and we know now that there's only a small subset of patients that are going to really benefit from a rapid response by EMS. And the other thing, I wasn't very good at explaining it, but in certain types of fires, response times are very important, as the fire chief would tell you. But not all fires either. So the Fire Authority was originally created in 1999. As most of you probably already know that. At the time we think it was the best option at that time. But fire authorities are typically temporary in Colorado. And funding for the current fire authority is derived from amounts received from each of the municipalities and emergency services districts. And the funding calculations are based on an equivalent of a 4.569 mill levy from each of the participating jurisdictions. 8-member board of directors and appointed via intergovernmental agreement from the 4 towns and unincorporated areas. Members can change often depending upon elections and so forth. And one of the things we found is the development of an acceptable level of expertise is difficult to achieve when, and again, this is not a criticism of anybody being incompetent or anything else, but when you're a member, if you're a member of a city council, an elected official, you have a lot more issues to deal with than fire. And so you've got to be aware of all these other issues, and where when you have a fire protection district, for example, the elected officials, that's all they focus on is fire protection. That's where their energy is focused on, and they develop their expertise on that. Again, it's not a criticism of anybody or their ability, but it does make it challenging when you have this fire authority and 8 members tends to be a lot of folks that can rotate frequently and can be cumbersome when you're talking 8 people rather than 3 or 5 or 7. So the current oversight, our opinion, the current oversight and funding sources are a lot more complex than necessary in a fire authority configuration. So we think one of the most important things you should do is convert fire protection district, convert the fire authority to a fire protection district, a Title 32 special district prior to any merger. And we think you should take those steps as quickly as possible. It won't be easy, it's complex, but we think that is definitely be in the best interest of your community and both organizations. But you have to be carefully consider the funding aspects of it. There may be limitations, as there usually is. And we also recommend a comprehensive, independent organizational analysis of the fire authority. And the chief said maybe they fixed some things that we have identified in the study, and that's great. So the intent of that is to evaluate the alternatives for delivering more cost-effective, efficient, and effective fire protection and related services. The Henderson Mine thing currently provides about 60% of the county's tax revenue. Significant changes in property tax rates could force the mine to withdraw. And Brian Bossart, is there anything you want to add on the Henderson Mine thing? Because that was sort of a confusing thing on, what they could do or would do. I talked to them, and they rely on the fire department and had no intention of pulling out, but I only talked to one of the bosses. Anything?
I
you
don't-
want to
I
add
don't
to
think
that?
I don't think I have much to add there. I think the concern was converting and what it increased their contribution to a Title 32. But I think, as you learned, they still need fire service up there, and they still need EMS service up there for any kind of incident that occurs above the mine. So I don't think that should be a problem for us moving forward.
I think originally there was concern that they might say, hey, if the taxes go up, they can pull out somehow. I don't know how that works legally. I'm not an attorney. But was that your impression?
Yes. Yeah. I think that was the initial concern. But again, given that they need those services above the mine, I just can't imagine that would happen. But obviously we need to have that conversation with them directly.
Because I think they have their own fire protection for underground, not above ground.
Correct.
Okay. So talk about Clear Creek EMS. A big deal. In 2017, the voters approved that special ambulance department sales tax of 0.65%. That represents the most significant revenue source of $1 million plus annually. If the two agencies were to merge, continuance of this tax would be questionable. I think possibly you could keep it, but I don't know it. And that's a legal question. But the county distributed a fact sheet during the time of the election. And the fact sheet said that revenues would be limited strictly to EMS, said nothing about fire. It also said if the county were to cease providing ambulance service, the sales tax would terminate at the earliest possible date, not data, sorry. And then, so technically, if EMS merged with the fire authority in its current format as a fire district, the county would no longer be providing ambulance service. So technically, the county isn't providing it, but a fire authority or a fire district would be providing it. So could they continue that? I don't know. That's a legal question. People could challenge it and say, I want the sales tax terminated because that's what you promised. So that would be a concern. My gut tells me that you could keep it, but I can't tell you that as a fact or from a legal perspective. So the rationale we used for not pursuing consolidation was we could not identify any compelling reasons that demonstrate substantial benefits or an immediate need to legally merge or consolidate. And that means immediately. We could not see that consolidation would have any impact on improving personnel deficiencies at fire. We think fire is understaffed, but merging them would not necessarily improve that. Still necessary to maintain minimum staffing on each of the ambulances. Most of the EMS staff would require specific firefighter and other training in order to provide fire suppression and other services. And it's unclear how many EMS staff would meet the physical and other requirements to become a firefighter. We didn't have the ability to go in and measure everybody and see how well they would do. You could have single role EMS providers at fire. That hasn't always been very successful. In Summit County, I did a project up in Summit County and the same thing. And we brought EMS over to one of the fire districts up in Summit County. And they've had some problems with creating a civilian EMS division, which was our recommendation that that would be a temporary thing until through attrition, the EMS folks retired or whatever, and then all the new paramedics and EMTs would have to be firefighters. So I don't know what their status is at this point, but they had some problems. If you moved EMS folks over to the fire authority to function in a dual role, meaning EMS and fire, they would likely expect to receive an increase in wages and benefits. So costs would go up. If they were to merge, you'd likely lose access to internal services such as finance, payroll, HR, IT, and other services that's provided through legal as well, provided through Clear Creek County government. So if you were to merge those two and become into a fire authority or fire protection district, you're not going to have those services. You're going to need access to those services, and you'll either have to contract with the county or outsource it somehow to get those sorts of services. With a larger group, the fire authority or fire protection district would need to hire additional administrative staff such as human resources. Again, that increases costs. As I mentioned in the survey, we had 45 respondents and 33% were generally in favor of consolidation, 18% opposed no matter what, 49% had no opinion or other position. And as I mentioned earlier, when we met in different groups and on individuals, only one person, and that was a person from EMS, said yes, they would like to go to fire and become a firefighter or paramedic. There was only one. Everybody else were opposed to that. I don't think that's a positive thing to push people into, dragging them, kicking and screaming into doing something they don't want to do. So could become real problematic if it was forced on people. Not saying that it doesn't need to be, that it shouldn't be done, but not quickly and immediately. Financially, given its current expenditures, Triton projected for substantial financial deficits at fire through 2026. Maybe that's been corrected, I don't know, but that at the time, the data we had shows financial deficits. We show the EMS projections show that revenues would probably exceed anticipated expenses. That's a good thing. In that case, consolidation would probably result in EMS subsidizing fire through its revenue sources. I don't know if that would be a good thing or not. The EMS could suffer by merging the two organizations. So we calculated, this is mill rates required in a consolidated agency, excluding the EMS sales tax. Let's just say the EMS sales tax went away and you put together one big agency. So in order to meet the current needs projected through 2026, the rate would have to go from 4.569 up to 12.8 in 2022 and up to 23.1317 by 2026. That's if you excluded the EMS sales tax. Now, let's say you're able to keep it, then it's a little bit better, but it's still a significant tax increase each year in order to meet current expenditures for both agencies. So alternatives and future considerations. We considered an alternative in which the fire would merge into EMS and become Clear Creek County Fire and EMS agency. We believe that option would still not resolve the issues, particularly the financial deficits. While we don't recommend consolidation for the immediate future, we think an eventual consolidation to a single all hazards public safety organization would ultimately be a positive thing. We think you should go for that and start planning for that immediately. It was, to be honest with you, among my team, it was a substantial discussion and debate on whether we wanted to recommend an immediate consolidation or not. It was, in the end, we ultimately decided that immediate consolidation would not be a good idea until some of these other issues were addressed. So, like I said, we think you should begin a comprehensive planning process to determine the political and financial feasibility of converting Clear Creek Fire to a fire protection district. That should be something that you should be doing immediately from a safety perspective, as we think, or from a management perspective, and of ultimately a safety perspective. Something needs to be done to get them more revenue and more people. To be honest with you, I-70 is, as you guys are, I'm sure, well aware, that is, if somebody's going to get hurt or killed, it's going to be along that freeway. And you need to have enough resources to manage motor vehicle accidents and other incidents safely. And that's not always possible given the current configuration of the organizations. So here are some potential advantages of consolidation. You get a larger pool of employees, can potentially reduce the cost per employee of health insurance and other benefits. Technology may be combined. You can eliminate the need for separate records management systems and CAD interfaces. And your insurance coverages can be combined, and it provides a broader spread of risk, and then it ultimately reduces costs. Administrative offices can be combined, eliminating the duplication of office equipment and other related costs. I wouldn't recommend laying off any admin staff. You need everybody that's in both organizations at the present time. Admin tasks can be combined, allowing for retasking of personnel to complete other work. And advantages from an employee perspective could potentially be higher wages and benefits for EMS personnel that become dual role firefighters, as well as more opportunities for promotion. So that's it. I don't know if I went too fast, too slow, but I'm open for questions, discussion, complaints, anything you want to talk about. Anybody? Or did I just put everybody asleep? Anything? Anything you don't agree with?
I'll just jump in, if I could, John, just to address your comment concerning the current EMS or ambulance tax that we have, the ambulance sales tax that we have in the county. It is my opinion that any merger that would essentially get rid of our ambulance department, is the best way to say it, would, as a result, extinguish that sales tax. So that revenue would not be possible. The ballot initiative and the resolution that created that sales tax is very specific as to the ambulance department, which is our EMS. So I just want to mention that I do think any merger would directly affect what we could use that sales tax for.
Peter, I presume that by that you mean that, I mean, the kicker is that if the service is not provided by the county, so therefore the only scenario within which that would happen would be if fire merged into EMS under the umbrella of the county, in which case the mill levy for the fire authority would no longer exist because it would disappear. It'd have to be, that's, I can't imagine anything like that working.
Correct. I mean, you could continue, I guess you could, and who's the attorney in this group? I can't remember. Oh, Peter is, okay. Well, yeah, I defer to your opinion. So you think it would have to go away then?
I
I mean,
am,
that's $1
I
million
am s-
plus a year in
yeah,
revenue.
I am quite certain it would go away.
Okay, yeah, and I am not an attorney. I defer to you, sir. $1 million plus a year going away, that would ruin the system. I mean, it just would.
I look at it a little bit differently. When we asked the voters for that, they knew what we were going to use it for. And if we came up with a more efficient system and asked for the approval again, I don't think it would be safe to assume they would say no.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. I agree with that, but I think that that's a little different than what Peter's saying, that technically at the moment that we merge, so it would take a vote to accomplish that in order to regain that tax.
Well,
Yeah.
and you're
Going
both
through the
right.
merger process or going through a process of creating a fire protection district, that would probably be, since Mr. Lichtman says that money goes away, then you have to plan carefully and what is going to be the property tax in order to cover all the expenses. And I mean, we estimated it without the EMS money, so taxes are going to go up. So maybe the community will vote yes on it. I don't know how receptive they've been in the past to tax increases.
Well, that one wouldn't actually be an increase. It would essentially be a replacement for something that was going away. So it would have no net effect, correct? Because if we're talking about the 0.65%.
Well, but that's a sales tax compared to a property tax. And
Oh,
so,
it's you're saying, yeah.
I mean, if the EMS money goes away, the EMS tax money goes away, we're talking about a tax rate of about 3 times of what each of the communities are paying now. So taxes, essentially triple. That's a real gamble. Say, hey, folks, we're going to triple your sales tax or your property taxes. What do you think? I wouldn't want to be the guy trying to sell that.
I think that another factor is that so much of the demand upon both of these services, to varying degree, is caused by the fact that we're a visitor economy, a tourism economy.
Right.
And much of the burden upon this comes from the outside, and only indirectly and in part is that derived back from property tax, from mill levies. Granted, the economy does affect those property taxes, and so it's partially collected. But we know that wildfire is 75% of fires, at least in the ARP, are human caused, and we know that most of the visitation in our forest is from external visitors, and then we know that a big part of our EMS burden, and that was the beauty of the sales tax, was that it allowed us to take the burden of a lot of the service we provide and shift it onto through sales tax, the folks that were creating that burden. In other words, our visitors who were creating the burden needed to share in the cost. And when we go back to property tax, we're more insulated from being able to do that.
Well, I think it warrants a more detailed analysis of potential other revenue, like charging fees, certain fees, fire benefit charges. Look more into the GEMT money. There are other alternative sources. Our biggest concern is safety of the firefighters and EMS providers, and particularly along I-70. And that I don't think there's enough, and my associates all agree, there's enough resources at either or both organizations to ensure safe incident scenes at a motor vehicle, significant motor vehicle accident along I-70. And we witnessed some things that really scared us in terms of not being able to, and it's nobody's fault. It's not somebody doing a bad job. It's just, you got to do what you can do with what you have. And so that's what we think is an immediate thing, is a safety thing. Any other questions, comments for me?
I've got a couple, want to defer to my colleagues on the Fire Authority Board. It's been commissioners talking so far, and always a little uncomfortable with that.
John, you're the president, right? What are your thoughts regarding what's been discussed from the fire authority perspective?
Well, I think that we probably need to get together as a group and hammer some of this stuff out. I think that the tax and sales tax and property tax stuff is, rough to figure out. You have to get with the towns, work in the IGA, sphere with the different towns and find out where they want to be with having personnel. I think our main focus needs to be, we need to get some more fire personnel at stations so that we can respond with good response times, and that's more money. So it does come down to figuring out our funding source as we're watching our existing funding source disappear. I liked having all the stats in the study. I thought that was really interesting. And I like that. I don't consider myself a fire expert by any stretch. So I would defer to the chief and the assistant chief for information on where we should go with that kind of stuff.
Any other reflections or questions for John from the fire board?
I don't have any.
Okay, well, I'll jump in. So I'm trying to reconcile two recommendations. You recommend a comprehensive evaluation of the fire authority, and you recommend pursuit of a Title 32 district. How do you see those two recommendations sort of sequencing or interacting?
Well, I guess if I had a magic wand, you guys have spent money on a study, and I don't want you to think I'm trying to upsell you on another study, but I would say a more detailed, focused study on the fire authority would be my number one thing. But in the meantime, it could be done concurrently, where you're starting to plan for a potential fire protection district. So it could be, concurrent, or at least an evaluation of the organization prior to that. But it ends up being more time and money, and I'm not a salesman. And we're kind of picky about coming across as trying to upsell you to, hey, do more studies, pay us more money. You already paid us a lot of money.
Okay, thank you. And I agree, I don't interpret this as a sales pitch. We all know we would do a public RFP and go with who we like. So I guess maybe what I'm not understanding is what the transition to a Title 32 would look like. or maybe what they look like where you've seen it play out in other areas. I think I presume that you're talking about the assets and the staff and the policies and just kind of the entire organization just living under a different legal structure, but being transported kind of in its entirety.
Well, exactly. They become, I mean, Title 32 special districts, they become a fire protection district. And there's different ways to do it. But essentially, you usually bring all the assets on. They do work under a different legal structure, but then they have taxing authority and you set the tax rates, and that can be voted on by the public. You may, if you need to increase the property tax rate, well, you wouldn't be increasing it because technically they're not paying for it now, they're paying it indirectly, but you would set your property tax rate and they would vote on it, and you become, George Marlin's fire protection district. Is that, I don't know if that answers your question. That's a complex question in terms of what way to go and how that works.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the question I'm begging is the evaluation of the fire authority and improvements that we make in the fire authority as a result of an evaluation and just our desire for continuous improvement would translate into the new organization, right?
You don't have to do a study first. I mean, you don't have to do a study. You could just go for a fire, immediately go for moving to a fire protection district, then, starting to plan how it should work and how it should be configured and structured and that sort of thing. It's essentially would be the same infrastructure in terms of fire stations and apparatus and all that sort of stuff. So you could convert to a fire district first, then do a study on how can we be a better fire protection, fire and EMS organization. And maybe part of that is bringing EMS into the fire protection district. There's different ways to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
We want it to be the most cost-effective, efficient, and safe thing for your folks. Honest to goodness, we want you to be successful on settling this down and getting a nice, stable, solid system. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but we're pretty picky about wanting you to do that kind of stuff. Any other questions for me?
I have a question, but before I ask you, John, I want to ask John Jennings. I think I understand your comment before about wanting to get together. The report's been out for a little while. I guess what I'm interpreting from your statement is that you guys haven't done like a work session or a retreat or kind of gathered just the fire board and the, whatever staff you want as part of that conversation to kind of have an internal conversation about what the report means and what you guys, what your plans are. Is that fair to say?
That would be very fair to say. We've scheduled a work session for trying to figure out our IGA, see where we could go with that. And I think we wanted to just work it through a little bit.
Okay.
And folks, Brian has my phone number and my contact information, email and so forth. If you have any questions you want to ask me offline, you're welcome to call me at any time. I'm usually working evenings and weekends. So don't hesitate to email me or call me or whatever. If there's questions, if you've read the report and you're going, what the heck does that mean? Don't hesitate to call me. I'm more than happy to answer more questions. We don't like to just give you a report, say, send us a check, see you later. We always maintain contact with our clients for a couple of years and try to provide some assistance if our recommendations are going to be implemented, those kinds of things. So we just don't go away. We'll be there if you need us. And we're not looking for more money.
I'll ask my question then, and it's for you, John. So it seems like at a high level, there's like four groups of stakeholders right here, right? There's EMS leadership, there's fire authority leadership. Well, there's five actually. There's the fire authority board, there's a board of county commissioners, and then there's county leadership. What I'm trying to kind of get and none of us, to my knowledge, maybe Andy has since he has a deep fire background, but none of us have really done this before. And so we got the report, which is a lot of good information. And I appreciate John Jennings' plan to kind of have those guys get together and figure out, get some consensus about what this means and what they want to do with it. But what's next after that? I mean, it seems kind of like the fire authority board, the board of county commissioners might be the natural two groups to try and get on the same page. But yeah, like I said, I've never done this before, so I don't want to, and this is a hugely critical, important thing that we can't screw up.
I appreciate what Sean just said. And I think one thing right now is also that I'm wondering this, I was wondering exactly the same thing, that next step and how do we go? And one thing is working in some other efforts where we have people of all kinds of disparate interests or disparate perspectives and experience to offer is sometimes we have you chair a large meeting and there are like 4 or 5 people that do all the talking and there's some other people that have perspectives to share. And to get the best out of this meeting, I see a bunch of people that I know on the screen who pretty much remain silent. And if there's something that's burning, I think of this as like a collaborative thing. Anything that you can offer there's nothing I'm afraid to hear tonight to help us make the next meeting that much better. So I'm looking at people that have not spoken that might have something in their head to help answer Sean's question.
I'll start. First thing we need to do is renew that IGA so that we don't have to worry about what's going on with that. It expires December of this year. We can't do anything beyond December if we don't have that IGA set in place. Once we get that done, then we have a little more comfort zone and time to explore the Title 32 and the implications and the cost, which I've already provided quite a bit of information over the past couple of years as we've been looking at that subject of merging. So we need to keep meeting and discussing the subject in a timely manner so that we can proceed. But starting a Title 32 district is a 2 to 3 year project just to get that accomplished. And we need to have a plan B in place in case our ballot questions fail at the election. If we don't get the district farmed or they don't approve the mill levy, which is 2 separate questions on the ballot, then we have to have something solid in place where we can continue to work and reevaluate that and keep looking at that for the future. So IGA first, I'll keep insisting on that, and then continue to look at the Title 32 subject and what that looks like. And Jeremy and I have both been looking at that pretty closely over the past couple of years. And so first thing we need to do is to meet some more.
Commissioner Wood, I would agree with Chief Babion. I would want to get the IGA continued to give you time. You got to maintain fire protection. But I think you can I would not have a huge committee. I'd maybe have an oversight committee that representatives from the county commissioners, fire board, and have some subcommittees or a subcommittee that is explore certain things. I would focus all my energy on looking at a Title 32, a fire protection district, and make that the #1 thing. And what are the steps that you need to take? And Mr. Lichtman should know, will be able to interpret all the laws and like, what do you have to do to implement that? And what are going to be the financials? What are you going to need to chart? What kind of revenue are you going to need in property tax rates and that sort of thing? So I would maybe have a smaller committee that would sort of report to the big committee of the fire board and the county commissioners. You can break those up into subcommittees that look at specific items. There's more than one way to do it. So I guess my emphasis would be to push for the fire protection district as number one.
Thanks, John. I'm going to follow Randy's lead and just going to do a quick round, work through the room and see who actually, I'm going to call on people. And if you really have nothing to say, then that's fine. But if you've had something to say, I'm going to give you a good reason to say it. I'll start with you, Mr. Curtis, since you're in the middle of my screen. What are your comments and thoughts about our discussion tonight?
Well, I know we looked at Title 32 before and kind of voted it down. That was years ago. And the climate has changed some since then.
Anything else?
Nope.
What about you, Mark?
Well, I agree with John. I think we just have to sit down and have some more discussion before we get too far into it. That's what I think.
Okay. Jeremy, what about you?
No, I'm all for Title 32 if it's the right decision for everybody involved and it's the best benefit to us. But yeah, I think the next step, and I talked to George a little bit offline too, is we need to get in the room and look at all the options and figure out what the priorities are from the mayor level on up. And how do we best meet those priorities and provide quality service and whatever that looks like at the end of that process. We just need to actively pursue that. But the first step is just figuring out what everybody wants, which same thing, Sean, like what you'd like to see. You bring 22 years of Evergreen and you have a different perspective than say I do, as far as different districts. So we need to sit in the same room and say what we like and what we don't like, and whatever that top 10 things are has become the priorities, and then we pick a direction and we drive that direction hard. If we want to get on the ballot, for example, in November, we really got to get together now and figure out where we're going to be and how we're going to get there and start that process. Otherwise, it becomes kind of like anything else we do. 3 years later, we're still talking about it, then this is all for nothing. And that's just kind of where I'm at as far as the daily operations stuff goes.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. And I appreciate your wishing to have a sense of urgency around this. And I totally agree with that. I think that that's something that we need to manufacture if it doesn't exist already, because yeah, time marches on, and we need to make some important decisions for sure. What about
Commissioner
you?
Commissioner Wood,
Yeah.
Jeremy mentioned something I felt I forgot to mention was, and I don't know what the politics are behind it, but has there been discussion with the rest of the county potentially merging with the other fire district? I can't think of the name off the top of my head.
Yeah, there's multiple fire districts around here, and there's definitely precedents from other districts like Foothills having done that already in the past. I don't know that there's ever been any kind of official conversation. And, you know, if I put on my Evergreen hat, Evergreen Fire Protection District is very blessed to be in an extremely tax-rich part of the Front Range. And it's hard for me to think of a reason other than neighborhood kindliness that they would financially want to do something like that.
I just finished, well, I didn't just, a few months ago, finished a consolidation study for Elk Creek and 4 districts there. So I wonder if that's a viable option.
I think it is. And I mean, I'm I know all the board members of the Evergreen Fire Protection District Board, and I'd be happy to have a couple of private conversations and see if they think that that's something that's even remotely in their headlights. But that's a tough lift. But I think that would provide probably better service for everybody, but it would also involve a level of redistribution of wealth that might be hard for some people to get their heads around.
Is Evergreen Title 32?
It is, yeah, it's essentially a fire-based. I mean, we don't have they don't have fire medics. They have full-time paramedic crews and multiple staff stations, and then volunteer response, and 100% volunteer group other than I don't know, there's maybe 2 or 3 paid people now. I haven't been around for a while, so I haven't been paying attention, but yeah, it's
In
a
your
model.
discussion, find out what their mill rate is. I'd be interested.
It's high. It's high. It's like tripled in the time since I joined in 1995, or maybe more.
They're just
It's not
under
high.
13.
It's not high compared to West Metro or the places down the hill, but it's very high compared to what it was in the 90s.
So Chief said it's just under 13, so.
But it was just for the purposes of conversation. 13 mills in Evergreen with the taxable value is equivalent to, I think, 33 mills in our county for same money. Just to so everybody understands what we're talking about. 13 mills in Evergreen is 33 mills in Creek County. So that is pretty substantial property tax increase to do for apples to apples, even money for both agencies.
That would be huge.
And we are also 360 square miles and they're 120 square mile district. So
That's right.
you add all that stuff in, and there's a lot of things that are different beyond just the tax base as far as the 2 agencies and how we have to operate.
Yeah, thanks, John. Those are good questions. Andy Marsh.
John, you mentioned safety concerns about incidents, particularly on I-70. Can you speak to that a little bit more on recommendations for addressing that? And I'd also like to ask if you have some recommendations or thoughts based on your study about coverages in the more densely populated areas, like the towns where you have more potential for loss of life in a larger incident.
Correct. Yeah, I-70 just, as you know, is a major freeway. And when you're responding to any incident along I-70, and fire and EMS guys, they can tell you the same thing. You need to have sufficient apparatus to protect the incident scene. I mean, one of the things we typically do on a car wreck, such as on I-70, is you pull a fire engine in front of or behind the accident scene. So if a vehicle were to hit, it's going to stop it and hopefully nobody gets hurt. If you're using a pickup truck or a car, they'll plow right through that and, hurt people on the scene. But you need to have enough people and apparatus, people to move those apparatus to get to the incident scene and set up safety. Everybody has a position on an incident like that, has a role. And so that's what made us all nervous. And we actually, a couple of my guys actually went on calls and observed that. And so the other thing is, I think it's a good point. You mentioned stations that are located in the more densely populated areas. Is that, ideally you would have more reliable staff in your higher population densities. Where right now you might have one volunteer that lives there. Like one of the stations, we taught there's one volunteer lives there, but he was leaving town for a few months. It really essentially had no value there. He gets free rent, and maybe, if he's there, there's he gets on a call. So it's a fine line in terms of how many career staff or paid staff do you need to staff your station? Is it going to be, Clear Creek County, is not a super busy system. And so you don't necessarily need full-time staff, but can you develop other programs, start recruiting more volunteers, have different programs? And these guys are doing some of that stuff. So it kind of, what I'm saying is why we're saying a comprehensive study is look in much more detail at all the fire stations, the staffing, and develop a plan on how should this fire department look in the future. Do you need more full-time staff? You know, do you need a different volunteer program? What kind of apparatus do you want to responding to car wrecks and other incidents? A whole variety of things. I don't know if that answered your question, Mr. Marsh, but does that make sense?
Yes, I guess it does. And I guess I'm asking, can you speak to what you see as the adequacy or how to improve, I guess, in the shorter term? I mean, what I hear you say is there's some immediate things that need to be addressed. And you mentioned, the incidents on I-70. Again, I'm also thinking the population centers, where you have more dense construction, very old communities, where the risk is extremely high. Of course, we have our wildfire risk out in the rural areas, but being from one of the towns and municipalities, I look at the risk in the communities there. Are there any thoughts or recommendations about how to address those?
There's all kinds of things that need to be done. I mean, it's sort of a comprehensive thing, from fire prevention activities, ordinance that you may have to pass certain ordinance in terms of building safety and fire life safety stuff, as well as having sufficient staff and equipment to respond to potential incidents, both fire and EMS. So it's an approach from various perspectives, and you need to have the people to do that. And you need to have, that's why we say we suggest a comprehensive evaluation of fire authority from A to Z. And again, it's not a criticism of any individuals. You've got to do what you can do with the resources you have. But looking at all aspects of that, what are the priorities? What kind of prevention programs, inspections, those kinds of things are all part of addressing fires, potential fires, and other incidents.
Did you
Does that
have
make
any?
sense at all? And Chief Babion or Jeremy, you can add to that. I'm not being very articulate in my explanation.
We just had a pretty comprehensive study done in 2015 that we've been working on and taking care of items on there. And then we had a strategic plan done in 2019 that we've been working on and taking care of items on that. So in order to address your questions, Andy, I think it would be beneficial for Jeremy and I to meet with you and go over those plans and what we've accomplished since 2015 and what our operations look like. And we know that we need people. The demographics of our county have changed significantly. We've gone from 100% volunteer base to a combination department where we have 10 paid staff, and we're using shift volunteers. We've adjusted to that demographic change a little bit. We still need to do more. 4 people full-time is essentially a full mill on the mill levy that we get, or the assessed valuation we get. So, yes, we know we need to put people in Idaho Springs and Georgetown, and we do that when we have more than 4 people on during the day. We'll split them up. We need to build a station in Idaho Springs to have a place for a shift crew to do their shift and be able to sleep overnight. That is a priority. If we had a place right now in Idaho Springs for 4 people or more to sleep, they'd be doing their shift in Idaho Springs rather than Dumont. And we need to do the same thing in Georgetown. We have 2 buildings that need to be replaced so that we can accommodate that. As far as the I-70 issue, our calls on I-70 are down significantly from the past. We used to cut on cars out there on a regular basis. Now we cut on a car maybe once every 2 months. So I could go into that in more detail. We have other agencies that respond to I-70. So typically we will have 5 or more vehicles assembled to do traffic control, and it works very effectively. Our shift crews are directed to take an engine out, a bigger engine out when they're on the highway so that they can protect themselves before we get Jeremy or myself out there to assist with that. So we have systems in place that we could get into more detail and explain to you and show you that we are operating pretty safely. So there again, we need to sit and talk and have some meetings so that we can educate everybody that has questions on what our capabilities are and what we're actually doing.
Do you have anything else, Andy?
No, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Mike Anderson, what do you have to add to the conversation, sir?
Sorry about that, computer failure. My comments are that I agree with the chief. We do need to step forward with the IGA. That's probably the first document that's going to keep us going. I think that's a good thing. And I think during that conversation, we can talk about Title 32 and mergers as a tertiary conversation. But as far as focus groups, I feel like the Fire Authority Board is the focus group for who they represent. I mean, whatever we decide, I'm going to have to take, and John and I are going to have to take to the Idaho Springs City Council to approve. So I think we need to get on the same page of what we're asking for. I think we're going to do some of that during their work session. And certainly this meeting will weigh heavy in that meeting, I imagine. But we need to come together as a collective on what we're asking for to get that IGA passed and what direction we're going from that.
Thanks very much. And I saw you unmuted yourself again. Did you have something else to add?
No, I'm just having problems.
Okay, fair enough. Police Chief Lynette, what do you have to add?
Actually, I'm glad Chief Babian chimed in with what has been done and put in place, because I was remembering a lot of what he mentioned in his last presentation to the Board of Selectmen. So I wondered if the study that was done, the feasibility study, includes specific recommendations for safety improvements, or is it a more general, just need to improve the safety because at the time that you were doing the study, there were not enough staff and apparatus showing up for the calls that you were looking at? Is that, are there specific improvements to safety in the study that
Is that a question for me?
I think so.
Yes, please. Yes,
Yeah,
please.
well, and that was not really, because that's outside the scope of the, of
Okay.
work in the study. We actually added things in our study that we weren't required to because we wanted to point that out, but we did not
Okay.
get into details of safety stuff, so.
Okay, okay. I just
Unfortunately.
wonder, I haven't had a chance to look at the study. Didn't see it before the meeting. So I wasn't sure what was in and what wasn't. I think that the fire authority has already done a lot of work on looking at what needs to be improved, how many more staff they need to be going for. I think this there a lot of the problems with the staff shortage can be traced back to the housing difficulties that we struggle with, because it's really hard to get people to volunteer if they aren't in secure housing and don't work right here. It's difficult. And the towns are starting to try and make effort to get more affordable workforce housing in place, but I think that's going to play into how successful the improvements that Chief Babian has already pinpointed. I think the two are going to have to work together.
That's a good
And
point. If I could just, I'm sorry to interrupt you, that
sure, go ahead.
housing's a big deal. And
Yes.
they had the same problem. We did a study for Aspen, Colorado, and they have a lot of money, and they actually built apartment complexes and housing and provide that for free or at a limited rent for their volunteers, because the people can't afford to live up there. I don't see that as an option in Clear Creek, but it is an issue of not having sufficient housing where people could live here and then volunteer or even be career people.
Right, right. Yeah, I think as I see it, Chief Babian's identified the IGA as step number one, and I totally agree. And then looking forward, figuring out what the process is, how do you talk about and pull things together to convert from the fire authority to the fire protection district. What does that entail? I'm glad to hear that there are fewer call outs for I-70, because for so many years that was the larger lion's share of what they were being asked to do, and to have the burden of funding that fall onto the property owners of the county is a tough sell, because that's not it's just tough. You almost want to say, well, why isn't the state helping to fund this, because it's a highway system, and is there anything that state funding could be called upon to cover? But if it's the number of calls for highway incidents are reducing, there's no guarantees on that trend continuing either. So people are driving pretty crazy in my experience.
I think you will see those calls along I-70 start to increase again. If Clear Creek County is anything like other communities that we're seeing around the country, COVID, substantially reduced calls. But I would guess, no way to say for sure, but I would predict that call volumes along I-70 will begin to increase as COVID sort of dwindles away, I hope.
Yeah, thanks, John. I want to be respectful of everyone's
Sure.
time. I know it's an
I'm
evening.
sorry.
And just, Lynette, do you have any final comments before we kind of round through everyone else, which there's not a whole lot left?
Nope, nope.
Perfect.
I think I covered it. Thank you.
Brian, you have been a city manager. You've worked closely with police and fire departments in the past. What are your thoughts? Do you have anything to add to our conversation tonight?
Not really. I mean, I enjoyed reading the study. I learned a lot about both entities. I guess the one thing I would add is with respect to next steps, recognizing it's only end of February, but December is going to be here before we know it. So while the Title 32 is going to take some time to work on, if that's where we all agree we're headed, I think at the same time, we're going to be needing to start those IGA negotiations again, given the fact that December is going to be here before we know it. And we haven't even started discussing what that process might look like, right? So I think that's going to be important for us as we move forward.
Yep, I fully agree. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Peter, do you have anything to add?
I do not. Thank you.
Beth, what about you? Okay, Brian Matsu.
Hello. Yeah, I would like to say that going forward, I think, this study has done a lot of good as it sits right now, and it gives us some direction to go in. I would, however, like to say that this round of talks about consolidation, I believe, the conception of it, I believe, came from mostly the fire board, which had quite a bit of discussion before we were ever asked to have dialogue about what needed to be done. And to me, the way we started at this, which is a good thing now, but kind of left a bad taste in my mouth early on. That it seemed like it was going to be more of almost a hostile takeover for preservation of something that the fire department needed, and that was money. So I think that we're in a different spot now. I think that has changed. And I think just in the future, we can never start at that again. We have the experts here on the panel. We have the stakeholders in the community, and we can do and make whatever we want to make, but it needs to be done with all of us. And it has to have the end product of the best product that we could give the citizens and the visitors of this county as far as patient care and as far as fire suppression. As long as we go in that direction, I think we could do anything and we could solve any problem if we keep those two things in mind.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you kind of having the courage to say that here in front of this group. And I know, Kelly, maybe it looks like you have something to say, and I'd be happy to hear a brief response.
Yeah, the talks about a merger started with our 2015 agency evaluation. It was suggested in there that be considered, and that's what started that conversation. So it was never, we wanted to take over the ambulance. That was the last thing I wanted to do because it was more work. And so hopefully that feeling has gone away, and I'll work on that more with you, Brian.
Thanks. And only two more left. Saber, you joined this conversation late, and we did a quick round of introductions. If you want to introduce yourself and have something to add, please do so.
Absolutely. So I am an employee of the county. I work down in the jail. I can't competently speak on the Title 32 or the merger. I'll have to do more research on my own. As somebody who's been cross-trained multiple times, multiple jobs, that can be overwhelming for some. I understand why quite a few people wouldn't want to participate in that. Other than that, if we could put all of this into more layman terms, hold like a virtual town hall, I think we would get a good response out of the community for it.
Thank you. Mr. Jennings, board chair, I will give you the last word.
I think everything's been pretty well stated. I think we have our directions. I'm not feeling animosity among everybody to move in any direction we need to go. So, as long as our boards can get together and the towns can understand where we need to go, I think we'll do just fine.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I have the same sentiment here. I wasn't really sure how this meeting was going to go or exactly what we were going to talk about. But I would also just say to Mr. Stouffer and your team, I think you guys did do a good job. And I thought there was a lot of good information in that document. And I think you made a really good point, which was, I think you guys kind of figured out right away the answer to the question, which is, should we merge or not? And the answer was not yet. And then I think your team did a lot of other interesting work since you were already here. That's leading us to a lot of other interesting questions that we need to follow up on. But I appreciate the work that you guys did. And I said I was going to give John the final word. Does anybody else have anything to say before we close this meeting and figure out what our next steps are? And the Board of County Commissioners, we had a conversation we're going to have after this. And I think part of that conversation is about how do we create the right sense of urgency? How do we create a roadmap that gets us the answers that we need pretty shortly and get an IGA in place so that people have confidence in fire protection in a very, in a timely manner. But with all that said, does anybody else have anything they want to add before we move on with our evenings? George.
Yeah. Thanks. Just a couple of notes from me. In the study, near the end, there are confidential, open-ended answers to questions. There's some kind of disturbing stuff in there that I just want to kind of make sure everyone knows that I saw and want to understand. So I wanted to mention that.
I'm sorry, I got to ask you, are you talking about comments from the
survey,
online survey?
Yeah.
Because we go through those and delete, disparaging, unnecessary comments. So if you have those highlighted somewhere, I'd sure like to find out. We can give you an amended document.
I'm not referring to inappropriate language or anything else. I'm just referring to statements that were made that raise flags for me.
Okay.
So I wanted to just mention that. I also want to mention what I read in the study. I don't see this in the recommendations, but I think we can go through this and find opportunity to make improvements through closer collaboration. For example, co-training. So I just wanted to state that. And then lastly, I just want to finish with the word urgency has come up a number of times. I think, Jeremy, you were the first one to mention it. I want to thank you. I don't think to date we have the kind of urgency. We've shown the kind of urgency that we need to solve this problem. And it's kind of bugging me. And so I hope you all know that I'm ready to put whatever energy we need to into solving this. And I hope that is mutual.
Thanks, George. Anybody else have any closing comments?
I would say with that urgency that, I'm getting the impression that people think that we're broken and that we're not doing our job. And I think that we're far different than that. So that discussion needs to happen soon. I think our biggest need, which is pretty obvious, is the revenue and some more people. But other than that, we're not broken. Comments that George saw in the appendices there, I think that the appendices should be left out of the public document. That was an opportunity for people to fling mud without any type of ownership. And there's some comments in there that are misinformed, and there's some disgruntled people that are no longer with us. So I would be happy to have a discussion on those issues with you, George, just to clarify that, because I can tell by the tone of some of that stuff who said it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know we've had some conversations about that topic in the past and look forward to it in the future.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I mean, the intention of the report, I think the county commissioners are the ones who sort of got this ball rolling. Wasn't to disparage anyone or to make anyone uncomfortable, right? I think maybe it was Brian Monsu who said it, right? And I 100% agree. It all comes down to, or all comes back to patient care, right? And how can we take care of our people? And I know that John said that too. So I appreciate the grace that you're demonstrating, Kelly, because, you know, when anytime a report like that comes out, people are looking in all the dark corners of whatever operation they're looking at. And, you know, so far, no one's commissioned a report on the 3 county commissioners, and they probably should, but, you know, I haven't experienced that myself. So, you know, I have some empathy for the position that puts you in. Anybody else have any final comments? I can't believe Randy's going to let this go and not have something to say here at the very, very end.
Oh, I've been schooled. Thanks.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you very much. I think this is a great first step. I look forward to collaborating with the fire authority and getting the IGA done and getting this figured out. And thanks again, John, for the work that your team did. So I think with all that
Thanks for
said,
the opportunity.
Wait,
oh,
wait.
oh yeah, we have
Don't
to.
forget, we still have, this is still a special Board of County Commissioners meeting. So I believe the board was next going to be moving into executive session. And just a reminder that we will come back after the executive session to announce that it's over and then close this special meeting of the Board of County Commissioners.
Thanks. I kind of conveniently forgot that I wasn't going to be finally eating dinner and doing whatever else I wanted for the rest of tonight. But with that said, I move the board move into executive session to discuss the following matters. Actually, yeah, go ahead.
Pursuant to CRS 246402-4B and E for the county attorney to meet with the Board of County Commissioners for the purposes of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions pertaining to entering into a new intergovernmental agreement with Clear Creek Fire Authority prior to or upon the expiration of the current agreement, and 2, determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators with regard to a new intergovernmental agreement with the Clear Creek Fire Authority.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. The board will now move into executive session. No written minutes will be kept. No decisions will be made. Thanks, everybody. I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
You guys want me on this call, or are we going to another one, or?
They're going to go to a different Zoom room. So you're all
Okay.
finished, John. You can go have dinner.
Thanks. Nice to meet you, Beth.
You too.
See you guys.